Aloha, what's up everyone? Welcome to my channel. Today we're talking about native emergence, mythic origins. The stories of various tribes of natives who have their origin stories that have been passed down typically orally. It's just a verbal tradition that many of them had. So they passed that down from family to family. And we're going to talk about those different stories. I feel like it resonates deeply with all of the research that I've been doing, especially on the hidden land at the North Pole and those people who are said to come up out of the land at that particular place. We're going to talk about that. So personally, I basically think, I'm not wearing my hat today too. I need to let my hair breathe. But personally, I believe that so far that there's three types of origins in general here in this world. One is those who come up from within, those who are born up out of the earth itself. Two, those who descend from above and they land in that exact same central location. And three, those who don't do either. They did come from one or the other, but after the reset, they are survivors who stayed on the surface and they happen to survive the plasma apocalypse as we talk about it from time to time. Welcome everyone who's live. Welcome everyone who is in the future, all you future people. Good to see everybody in the chat. I'm always so excited to see all the good vibes. Coincidence theorist. Hey, you got the acronym. Very good. So I did purposefully spell it Nemo on purpose, right? And that's based off of the etymology of the word Nemo as we've broken it down quite a few times here on my channel. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to jump into some stories. The first one I'd like to share with you is from one of my favorite tribes, the Hopi. If you're Hopi and you know it, clap your hands. All right. Well, anyways, here's a Hopi legend about their emergence story, right? So there is a creation legend. There is the creation stories of how our world was physically actually created and made. But then there is the emergence story, which is the story of various tribes of people and how they emerged from a particular location here in the world. Now, I have found that in the course of my personal research that I use comparative mythology to figure out the similarities between all of these emergent stories and creation legends and whatnot. I look at all of them that I come across and I compare them to see what matches up. Right? To see which ones resonate with each other, how they're vibing with each other, and what similarities they share as far as their stories go. Please keep in mind, this is one of the things that helped me out personally the most when deciphering these ancient myths and legends, that they are cartoonified. It's a word that I affectionately use to label what we have done collectively, consciously or subconsciously, to our ancient origins. We have cartoonified them. They have become movies and myth and fantasy and fiction and stories to behold. So keep that in mind. If they talk about how, I'm just going to make something up, but if they say that the crow sang out a bunch of light or whatever, does it mean that a physical animal called a crow did that? It could be a cartoonification. So keep that in mind as we've talked about before. First up on the list is the Hopi emergence myth. Now, I just did a video about this. It's called something like Find the Center Place. The Hopi were told to find the center place, and that's how they would know that they had returned to their origins, to their place of origin. So before the Hopi were on the surface world where we live today, it says, after the departure of Spider-Woman. Now it's called Spider-Woman, and immediately many people will automatically think about Marvel and Spider-Man and all the various heroes and legends. That's because those are all retellings of these stories that we're about to share today, right? There's nothing new under the sun. After the departure of Spider-Woman, who I believe is a cartoonified version of the red plasma above that branches out, sort of like the Kraken or other serpentine type monsters and of legend and of old, right? After the departure of Spider-Woman, the people set out once more to discover their new world. That's because when you see Spider-Woman, that is an apocalyptic event. That's the plasma coming in from above that's wrapped around our world, grounding itself like fiery dragons and plasma snakes and whatnot. Hold on. I gotta check the chat. I gotta make sure We are still good. We're still good. Oh, sweet. Right on. All right, cool. Let me jump back in here to my notes. All right, after the departure of Spider-Woman, the people set out once more to discover their new world. So it's not the first time that this has happened. This happens many times. It happens over and over again. Alone, they set out, traveling east and a little north, paddling hard all day and night for many days, as if they were paddling uphill. So the Hopi set out, they got onto the waters and they started paddling, but they were fighting a current, it sounds like to me, that was so strong that it felt to them like they were paddling up a hill. And also I would say that that's relevant to the North Pole because there is said to be a constant current around the North Pole. Modern academics refers to it as the polar vortex, and it's a current that is at the central part of a torus field at the center of our world. And it causes things like the ocean currents and the air currents and other types of currents that follow suit with the energetic currents. All right, so they were paddling and they felt like they were paddling uphill. At last, they saw land, but it rose high above the waters, stretching from north to south as far as they could see, a great land, a mighty land. Their inner wisdom told them, "The fourth world," they cried to each other. Now, time out. This is how they described these different excursions, these different exoduses, these trips that they took, these sabbaticals, every apocalyptic cycle. They labeled the new place they arrived the New World, or world number 1, world number 2, world number all the way up to 4. And I mean, different tribes have different numbers. They count them differently. But basically, according to most, we're in the 4th, going into the 5th, or some people add an extra world or one less. They just count them differently. So they're like excited. They're like the 4th world, the new world, the promised land, basically. As they got closer, its shores rose higher and higher into a steep wall of mountains. A wall of mountains. Now remember, when we're talking about the land at the North Pole, it said that basically they show it on old maps that it is a valley that is surrounded by steep and high jagged mountains. And then once you get on the other side of those mountains, it's a fertile, beautiful valley. There's jungle kind of foresty areas and stuff. It's very lush, magical, strange creatures are there. There's pygmies, there's giants, there's all kinds of interesting stuff. As they got closer, the shores got higher and higher into a steep wall of mountains, and there seemed no place to land. "Let us go north. There we will find our place of emergence," somebody said. Right? And so they went north, but the mountains rose higher and steeper. "No, no, no, let us go south. There will we find our place of emergence," cried the others. So they turned south and they traveled many days more. But here too, the mountain wall reared up higher and higher. So they're confused, right? They're lost. This is a lost tribe. And this is also another correlation that I have found in researching the various tribes of the world, especially those that are more enigmatic or quite physically lost. They have disappeared for strange reasons. Who have difficulty tracing their origins and where they come from and whatnot, right? They have been spread out and lost their identities, typically actually losing their way, not knowing which direction on earth to go in. Because when we go through these cyclical cataclysms, the directions flip. We go through a polarity flip, basically, right, of our world. It's an electromagnetic flip or reversal. It's a polarity reversal. And because of that, all of the directions switch around, right? So all of our directions today in the modern world are not what they once were a long time ago. So these people are confused about the directions. When this happens too, all of the heavenly luminaries start moving in different directions after each apocalyptic cycle. So it makes it very difficult to find your way if you use those landmarks or celestial markers that you had prior to that apocalyptic cycle. So they say, let's go north, no, let's go south, etc., right? And this, I believe this helps to explain a lot of the exploration that was done and funded by many of the world's elite, those kings and queens, presidencies, and all of that fun type of verbiage. They hired their own personal explorers to go find legendary artifacts, to go find legendary lost cities. When today, we would laugh at that. We would think that that's ridiculous, right? But they've already done it. They've already sent all of these different people out to go find the Fountain of Youth, the Spear of Destiny. Alexandra, hey, what's up? Thanks for joining my channel. Appreciate you. All right, let's move forward. Now, they didn't know where to go. Not knowing what to do, the people stopped paddling. They opened the doors on the top of their heads, and they let themselves be guided. Almost immediately, the water smoothed out, and they felt their rafts caught in a gentle current. Before long, they landed joyfully and jumped out onto a sandy shore. "The fourth world!" they cried. "We have reached our place of emergence at last!" So that's what they were looking for. They were returning to the place where they were born out of, right? They were returning to the womb of the world. Why? Because that is the elevator between worlds. Basically, that's the place where you can go up and ascend into another world, the next world, the fifth world, the sixth world, etc. Or you can descend. You can go back down into those prior worlds. It's called the navel of the world. Also really interesting too, the word native is directly related to natal, which means birth, to be birthed out of, to be born, right? All right, so we continue on, and looking to the west and the south, the people could see sticking out of the water the islands upon which they had rested. So these people were living on some sort of islands or island chain or something, and they looked back and they saw all those islands. Now, they spoke to one of their gods named Sotuknang, and he says, "They are the footprints of your journey." So they looked back, saw all those different islands that they were on, and this creator god said, "Those are the footprints of your path," right? Those are like little stepping stones to where you've come from. "The tops of the high mountains of the third world, which I destroyed. Now watch." As the people watched them, the closest one sank under the water, and then the next, until all of them were gone, and they could only see water. "See," said Sotukeng, "I have washed away even the footprints of your emergence, the stepping stones which I left for you." So this creator type of a god, right, is basically saying, each time that you go through these cyclical events, each time that you emerge into a new world, you will be lost and confused, and it's purposefully done. I will erase the path to get back home because I don't want you to come right back home. I want you to spread out. I want you to go out there because there is a purpose to it. But when the time comes, I will reveal that path to you once more. Right? So there is the time when the chosen people, the surviving people, however you'd like to see it, the Nemo of the world, that they come up, they emerge, they settle in a place that is like paradise, and then a time comes where they're forced out of that paradise, where they're spread out across the land, and then another time comes when they regroup and they all get together from the various corners of the world. Every place that they have spread out to, they hear a calling, and they all come back together as one family and one tribe, and they seek out that place of emergence. So he goes on to say, "I have washed away even the footprints of your emergence, the stepping stones which I left for you. Down on the bottom of the sea lie all of the proud cities, the flying Patuvotas." Now, hold on. Let me time out on that one, okay? So he's saying at the bottom of the ocean, this is just like the Atlantis story, right? And many others, because that's exactly what this is. They're all very similar because they're the same. They're describing the same event, right, in general. And he says, if on the bottom of the ocean are all of those proud cities, right? Where we live right now, the world is still flooded. I just want to remind everyone, okay? We call it the ocean affectionately. We slap a label on it and we forget what it is, where it came from, etc. We don't really talk about it, but that is a remnant of the actual worldwide flood, which is where the oceans came from, right? Where we live now are the highest places that where the water has gone down. We live on mountaintops, basically. Every country, every continent is a high place in the world. One day that water will be removed once again because it's a cycle. It goes back and forth. The introduction of water, the cleansing, the washing, and then the burning away, which is the next one to come. How do I know? Because the oceans are still here. But anyways, then he says at the bottom of the ocean that these people will find the flying Patau Votas. And that basically means a flying disc or a flying shield. These were a type of craft like the Vimanas from ancient Hinduism and whatnot, flying technologically advanced craft that were destroyed and sank and went to the bottom of the ocean. And this is in a Native American legend. They should have, technically, according to what we're taught, they should have no business knowing about advanced technology and flying UFO type discs and stuff at the bottom of the ocean, right? He goes on to say, you'll find these things at the bottom of the ocean and the worldly treasures corrupted with evil. And those people who found no time to sing praises to the Creator from the tops of their hills. But the day will come, if you preserve the memory and the meaning of your emergence, when these stepping stones will emerge again to prove the truth that you speak. So that's the good news, right? There's always good news and bad news. The bad news, everybody wants to focus on the bad news these days. The bad news is that the world was flooded, everything was destroyed, it's going to happen again, the next time by fire, etc. But the good news is there is a preservation, right? There is a remnant. There are survivors. There are those who will live to see a good time and a good day and good energy and good vibes restored to this place. I look forward to it. And when that time comes, that the path would be made clear, that the way would be made clear for people like us to get home again. And that is one of the Hopi creation stories. There are many, just so you know. There's not like official, like this is the creation story or this is the emergence story. There's many different tellings and retellings of all of these stories. And I find it's best to read as many as you can if you're interested in this type of stuff. That way you can get all these different perspectives and take all of the similarities to glean more truth from it, right? All right, let's move on to the next one. We're going to stay in the Hopi, actually. This is really interesting. I found this, talks about the ant people. Some people may have heard of the Hopi referring to the ant people, etc. I'm going to read this about the ant people, and then I'm going to talk about those celestial shields, or those flying shields, I should say. The celestial beacon took them to the sky. Actually, let me back up just a bit. Let's see. It says here, I'm reading from enigmos.com if you want to follow along. It says the Hopi creation myth describes a global cataclysm, the end of the third age that brought us into the current fourth age, or the fourth world. Members of the Hopi tribe were led by an odd-shaped cloud by day and a moving star by night, which sounds amazingly similar to the cloud that led the ancient Israelites during their 40-year sojourn of Exodus, right? And I also have found many correlations between the many Native American stories, not just the stories, and not just Native Americans, tribal people, native people from the world around, the world across. They share in their telling and retelling of all these stories. The biblical ones are probably the most prolific and they're probably the most well-known. But you'll find those exact same stories in the ancient writings of Babylon and Nineveh and South America, all across the world, right? And the Hebrews being the lost tribe or whatever, that's very similar to these types of things that we're talking about. The celestial beacon, that's interesting. That's a sign in the sky, right? And these tribes, many of them were told to look for heavenly signs that would lead the way, or that would be warnings to them, that they should keep their eyes on the sky. The Hopi creation myth describes a global cataclysm that led them into the fourth age. They were led by the odd-shaped cloud. The celestial beacon took them to the sky god Sotokneng, leader of the sky people and nephew of the creator god Mahasal. Sotokneng hooked them up with the ant people. So check this out about the ant people. It says that he led them to a big mound where the ant people lived. Mound is another word for monde, or earth, right? A huge earth. It basically means mountain. It's the root word for our word mountain, right? So there was this huge mountain, a big mountain, a high and lofty mountain, one could say, right? Rupas Nigra, where the ant people lived. Stomped on the roof and commanded the ant people to open their home. When an opening was made on top of the ant hill, Sotokneng said to the people, "Now you will enter this ant kiva, where you will be safe when I destroy the world." Right along the lines of everything I've been talking about here on my channel as far as surviving the apocalypse. People are like, I talk about the plasma apocalypse, and all the new people are like, when's it going to happen? How do I stay safe, etc.? Watch the signs, and the only safe place, according to these writings, across the board has been some sort of sacred, holy mountain that is different than all of the other mountains of the world, higher up than all of the other mountains of the world. And I have found that it's traditionally located at the North Pole. It's called Rupus Nigra. It's got many different names. Some religions and belief systems call it Sinai. Other ones will call it Mount Olympus. They've all got different names for this particular mountain of the gods, where people meet up and live and have councils and stuff. He says, now you will enter the Ant Kiva, where you will be safe when I destroy the world. When you are here, I want you to learn a lesson from these ant people. They are industrious. They gather food in the summer for their winter. They keep cool when it is hot and warm when it is cold. They live peaceably with one another. They obey the plan of creation, which is what the Hopi learned from them, was how to live peaceably, right? That's literally what Hopi means. It means peaceful people, basically, or those of peaceful intentions, I guess you could say. And that's what they're called to do. They're not called to violence. They're not called to destroy and to take away. They will protect, right? They will protect their family and themselves and their livelihood, etc. Well, at least they're supposed to, right? My heart breaks for the condition of tribal people the world across and how they've been treated and what's happened to them. But I will tell you, if that's you, the day of reckoning is coming. That's what the writings say. That's what the histories all say. Don't lose hope. Don't give up hope. Because right when you feel that hope is all lost, all of us collectively, when we need it the most, that's when these signs appear. That's whenever these heroes of old emerge and they come back and lead us, basically, to safe places, to safe havens and stuff. And they fight with celestial gods and stuff, and Ragnarok happens. All right, so the Hopi called these creatures Anu Sinum. Anu, in the Hopi language, means ant, right? Which is really interesting because the word ant itself actually basically kind of implies head, right? And then there's the horns that are on the ants, so perhaps these creatures or beings had horns. That's a possibility. I've done many videos about how human beings do grow horns. We grow horns, we grow tails. It's just that something's happening with our DNA and how it is restricted, or if it's opened up based on our living conditions in the world that we live in, right? Seems that some of it is on reserve to help us out when the world changes, right? All right. Oh, so Anu means ant, Sinum means people, which is really close to the Anunnaki, right? Which is also another Hopi word. Naki, what was it? Is it in here? Oh, friend. Naki means friends, right? So the ant friends, which I love because it's so, check this out. On a personal note, my son and I had him watch Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And there's this really heartwarming scene in there where they make friends with an ant and he protects them from the scorpion or whatever, but the ant dies. And my poor little guy, he was like 5 years old. He was crying and he was so sad for the ant friend. He kept calling him his ant friend. He went outside and he made little ant friends and stuff. It's very similar. And I love that. I love that the Hopi talk about sky brothers and ant friends. And you know what I mean? It's no wonder they're called the Hopi. All right. So let's see. Anu, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. I'm going to skip down a bit. The ant people led the Hopi into caves where they found refuge and food. And this is during the apocalypse. This isn't just, refuge and food because the world's all messed up and crazy and people are whatever. No, this is an apocalyptic event that they are hiding out from. All right. So moving forward, it says, this happened as per legend, not just once, but twice, at the ending of the first world, which was destroyed by fire, and the second, which was destroyed by ice. So you're going to see a repetitious pattern emerging because the next time, I believe, this is my personal opinion, Elizabeth, welcome, is that fire's coming back again. It's cyclical. It's spiral. It happens in spirals. So fire is the next one, which is good because it's the shortest one. Okay, so the fire apocalypse is real strong, but real quick. The water apocalypse, people have been warned for centuries, like, you better hope it's not the flood apocalypse. That's a super dangerous, terrible one that wipes out most all life, basically. All right, let's see. We got the Hopi flying shields. Let's talk about that, and then we're going to jump into some other clans and tribes. The Hopi flying shields. It says another interesting tidbit about the Hopi lore is their flying shields. During the Third Age that ended with the Great Flood, similar to Noah's flood that was of the Gilgamesh type, the Hopi legends state that people built flying shields with the capacity to move rapidly between distant points in the world. This is technology, right? This is some kind of technology. This is something that we don't have today, that I know of at least, right? Really interesting stuff. These flying shields are quite similar to the Vimana aircraft of ancient India. The flying saucers of the ancient Indians on the other side of the globe, the Indians of India. The Hopi called their flying craft Patau Vota. The other people hardly heard them under the leadership of the Bo clan. They began to use their creative power in another evil and destructive way. Some of them made Patau Vota, and their creative power made it fly through the air. On this, many people flew to a big city, attacked it, and returned so fast that no one knew where they had come from. Soon, the people of many cities and countries were making Patau Vota and flying them to attack one another. This is all the events that were leading up to various lands sinking down into the ocean as the waters rose, right? And this is the exact same stories of Atlantis and other legendary lost cities that were flooded. The flying shields of the Hopi vanished at the end of the Third Age, the Great Flood, as described by the Hopi legend. And once more, it quotes the Sakut Nanag. And he says, I have washed away even the footprints of your emergence, the stepping stones which I left for you. Down at the bottom of the sea lie all of the proud cities and the flying Patau Votas. Interesting stuff. All right, cool. I'm going to go on to the next thing here. Let's see. One moment. All right, cool. So now we're going to talk about the emergence into the fourth world real quick. We're still on the Hopi, just so you know, but we're going to move into the Chippewa next. All right, so the fourth world. This time, the people had to search long and hard for a place just to establish themselves and to start over again. The Hopi tradition tells of endless journeys by boat, paddling uphill all the way. From time to time, they would find a place to land, beautiful and bounteous, only to be told by Spider Woman that they must move on. This place was too easy, and soon they would fall into evil ways if they stayed there, right? So that's what happens if people are not on the move, which means growing, which means life, which means love, right? Movement means that you're alive, basically. If you start becoming static as a people, death and decay creep into society. When people stay and they create cities and citadels and all that other stuff, right? As evidenced by the present age. Finally, completely exhausted from their fruitless efforts, the people opened their doors on the top of their heads and let themselves be guided. The water carried them gently to a sandy shore where they were greeted by Sotukneng, and given further instructions. They were to separate into different groups, each heading in different directions, to claim all of the land for the Creator. Each group would have to follow its own star to a place where the earth met the sea. They would complete such a journey 4 times in all to cover all of the 4 directions before being guided back together again to settle permanently, right? So they were commanded. This was a commandment. They were told or forced out of Eden, so to speak, right? They were forced to distribute themselves, to spread out, to disperse. This is a dispersal of this tribe. Which makes a lot of sense too, right? Let's say that tribe settled in that place of paradise. They're going to procreate over time, right? And it's going to become overpopulated, especially if it's a small island type of an area. And then the time will come when certain barriers are let down and the people will spread out and they go out to the 4 corners of the earth. Now, before the newcomers to the fourth world set out on their migrations, they were given a tablet, some say tablets, containing symbolic representations of their journey and final resting place, and events that would confirm their adherence to the Creator's plan. The tablet best known today is reportedly held by members of the Fire Clan. This tablet has always had the corner missing, that, according to legend, is in possession of a lost white brother called Bahana. Bahana's return with the missing corner will signal the beginning of a new brotherhood of mankind. So in layman's terms, what that means is that the legends and the myths and the stories say that before they dispersed, before they took off, that this other race of human-like beings called the Bahana, sometimes it's Bahana, sometimes it's Pahana, right? But the Bahana, they broke off a corner, right, of this sort of rock slate that had some drawings on it and stuff. And the corner that they broke off, well, the main picture was said to be like a person, like a stick figure, basically. And the corner that was broken off was that stick figure's head. So what was left for them was like a headless figurine or whatnot. And when the Pahana returned, that they would match up their missing puzzle piece, which I like, with our missing puzzle piece, and we would see that the head was restored to the body, and that's how we knew that that was the correct, white space brother or whatever. Which they should have done whenever, the various tribes from Europe were coming over here into South America, and they just saw white people, and they're like, oh, it's our lost white brothers, so you must be the gods. They didn't check for that missing puzzle piece, or they prolonged that a bit too long, right? These words were spoken by Sotuk Nang at the beginning of the fourth world. See, said Sotuk Nang, I have washed away even the footprints of your emergence, the stepping stones which I left for you. All right, I'm going to skip that part because I already read it. But the day will come if you preserve the memory and the meaning of your emergence, when these stepping stones will emerge once again to prove the truth that you speak. That means that they're not believed. When they talk about their origin stories, right? When they talk about their ancient legends and myths of coyotes and spider women and reeds growing up into space and stuff, people don't believe that. That's fiction. That's fantasy. But the day will come when Atlantis will rise again, and the people are going to have to give deference to these native tribes that have been saying this all along since the beginning. All right, next up we've got the Chippewa. This is the ancient, this particular website calls this the ancient astronaut legend. This is the legend of a man who fell out of the sky from another world. Multiple Native American groups have legends relating to sky people. Most commonly, they are tied into creation narratives. The Blackfoot mythos assign personas to various heavenly bodies, which is not unlike other world cultures. The first sky being was Natosi, personified by the sun. Other gods and goddesses were personified by the moon and the morning star. The race of the sky people was represented by the myriad of heavenly bodies, the stars. As per the mythos, they have their own society above the clouds, and that they were above people, right? The lore of the Ojibwe, or the Chippewa, as they are most commonly known, contains the story of the woman who fell from the sky. She was one of the above people. When she became pregnant, she fell out of heaven. Some stories state that the tree of life was uprooted and she fell through the hole, which would draw some parallels to the Judeo-Christian creation narrative. So this story already is lining up with my own personal research of the tree of life being at the middle, at the center. That is Jack's beanstalk. That is the reed that is hollowed out, or the bamboo shoot that grows up from the center of the earth and touches the sky. And it is a place where people can traverse, where the angels go up and down, just like Jacob's ladder, right? It's a highway into heaven, or into the heavens, I guess you could say, right? And there's people up there. There's people above us. There's people below us. There's people probably off to the sides, way outside of our boundaries. So the tree of life was uprooted and she fell through the hole under the tree of life. So there is a hole said to be underneath this tree of life, this huge tree. And if that tree of life is a plasma beam that shoots up out of the earth, sharing inner earth energy and filling our world with harmony and peace and good vibrations for an age, right? Stands to reason that it came from somewhere. It comes from what I call a plasma volcano, an inner earth cavernous opening that goes all the way down into the inner recesses. And the plasma, the energy, just follows it all the way up, shoots outward, and then branches out as it comes up to the surface, creating what looks like a burning bush, the tree of life, etc. And that hole is the same in Norse mythology as Holdmimi's Holt, which is where Leif and Leifdrazir, they go to be safe during Ragnarok. Same exact story. Goes on to say, the Iroquois and other native groups have similar myths. So these are not just centrally located and belong to one tribe in particular. They all tell variants of the same exact story. Variations. One moment. I'm going to find out where I was here. Oh, here we go. It says, some Indians were walking over the plains when they saw someone sitting on the grass. It was a man. Kim Fuji, welcome. They saw someone sitting on the grass, and it was a man. When they approached, he halted them by raising his hand. He said, I don't belong here. I dropped from above. They wished to take him home with them. They told him to go home and to clean the place where he was to stay, and then he would return with them. After they had done this, they came back for him, and he was a nice-looking man, clean and shining bright. He stayed with them. So, one of the shining ones from above who fell down below, right? And it doesn't say that he descended or that he landed in some kind of a craft or anything. The story indicates that there are animals, creatures, and human-like beings that seem to just fall bodily, right? At least sometimes. Sometimes they talk about crafts and stuff. But how could that be possible for anything to fall bodily without being smashed into the ground and instantly dying? There must be some sort of a condition change atmospherically or some sort of a change in our world that allows for during a specific time for things to float down instead of to fall down, which means it stands to reason that one possibility is that there is an event that adds increased buoyancy in our atmosphere to allow things to weigh less and to fall slower and stuff so that people can do that sort of Jumanji Superman Fortnite falling to the ground without getting hurt type of thing, right? All right. Every day at sundown, he watched the sky. In a clear voice, he said, something will come down. I will go up. He said that he had been running in the sky and there was an open place. He couldn't stop running, so he dropped through. There's a hole in the sky. I don't know. I'm going to be very blunt right now. There is a hole in the sky, okay? Like at least at times, there is a hole up there in the actual sky, and the native legends and myths make reference to this across the board. They talk about, sometimes they refer to it as like the place where the sun sleeps, the cave of the sun, etc. Oftentimes the sun itself is said to have come from this hole in the sky. But there are other creatures and animals and people that all go up and down through this particular celestial hole in the firmament. All right, now he says, one afternoon he said, now it is coming, and everyone looked up. But they could see nothing for a long time. The man who kept Skyman at his home could see better than all of the others, and he saw a brilliant star shining way up in the sky. The other Indians didn't see it until it came near to the ground, and they had never seen anything nicer in the world. That's another thing, too, about these sky people. One, they're said to shine. They're said to possess a glow to themselves, right? Specifically from the eyes, but possibly from other parts of the body as well. Another thing is that they're beautiful to behold. They're said to be, they're just, their bone structure, their muscle structure, their skeletal structure, all that stuff is said to just be very healthy and therefore beautiful looking to us when we see them. Goes on to say 2 men got a hold of it and pulled it down. Skyman got into it, and then it rose, and he was gone. They had tried to get him to stay, but he said that he must go. He is up there yet, or still. You can see him on clear nights. Interesting. All right, let's move on from the Ojibwe, or the Chippewa, to the Seneca. The Seneca have a very similar story, right? So this is an emergence from the sky. Sometimes there's an emergence from the earth itself. Sometimes there's an emergence from the sky. Typically, the emergence from the sky are those otherworldly type of alien humanoids, I guess we could say, that come down. They float down from our world to time. They land right at the North Pole area, usually, and then they take off. they're visitors. They come in, they stay for a while, and during the next apocalyptic cycle or depressurization event or polarity flip, they take off and they go once again, just like NASA and Elon and all those other people are getting ready for, in my own personal opinion, at the moment. They're getting ready to go. This one says, hold on, let me just check to make sure there's no issues with the stream. Oh, sweet, right on. All right, cool. I hope you guys are having a good time in the chat. I'm going to continue. I'm just going to roll on. It says, a long time ago, this is Seneca, a long time ago, human beings lived high up in what is now called heaven. They had a great and illustrious chief. It so happened that the chief's daughter was taken very ill with some strange affliction. Every known remedy was tried in an attempt to cure her, but none had any effect. Near the lodge of this chief stood a great tree. This would be the tree of life, which every year bore corn used for food. The tree of life itself creates a substance, manna, soma, there's all these different names that people have called it, the food of the gods, the drink of the gods, etc. And you don't have to actually eat food from the earth. You can eat food from the tree of life itself, and it sustains you because it's energetically charged. One of the friends of the chief had a dream in which he was advised to tell the chief that in order to cure his daughter, he must lay her beside this tree, and that he must have the tree dug up. This advice was carried out to the letter. While the people were hard at work and the young woman lay there, a young man came along and he was very angry. He said, "It is not okay for you to destroy this tree. Its fruit is all that we have to live on." With this remark, he gave the young woman who lay there a shove with his foot, causing her to fall into the hole that had just been dug, right? I also want to comment on the dream thing. Back when our world was more energetically filled, when it was more charged up, right? Because every other cycle, the world becomes filled with magic from within, right? The electromagnetic barrier goes back up. It traps all of that energy that is leaving from inside of the earth, coming up to the surface, and it fills up the surface world, making it very nice, very positive, very healthy side effects for us for an age or for an eon, right? During that time, I have found that many of those stories that seem to harken back to those times talk about how people believed their dreams. That in the dream world, they listened. In the dream world, they were spoken to. They were told how to heal people, where to go, what to do. They were given signs and omens and predictions and prophecies. As a matter of fact, there's a famous one by Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, as he's known. And one of his very first predictions, if I remember correctly, was that he himself was actually extremely sick. This may have been the beginning of his sort of meditative journey. He was super sick. He was deathly ill. He went to the hospital. He's laying there sort of comatose, in and out. I mean, maybe not comatose, but he was in and out of, being aware. And as he was laying there sleeping one time, he actually sat up and he started telling the nurse what to go get to heal him. Even though he had no prior medical knowledge about things, he basically told them, this is what you need to do to heal me. And he got that from the Akashic records when he was dreaming, when he was sleeping, when he was in the dream world. And it worked. And he was healed. And he became quite something to talk about. And everyone was stirred up and wanted to visit Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet. And he did it over and over and over again. All right. Let me continue on with this. So, the chief's daughter was sick. They put her next to the tree of life. They started digging up the tree of life and created a hole. She fell into that hole, down into another world. That would be our world. All right. Then it goes on to say, now the hole opened up into this world, which was then all water. That's another thing that every single one of these emergence stories talks about, was the world was water. The world was just full of water. It was flooded all over the place. All the people that lived above looked down. They're like, nope, only water creatures can live down there. So quite often you'll see various similarities that they actually sent various animals down to the depths of the ocean to bring mud up to the top, that they lifted mud up in order to create land. That land itself was made from the mud being pulled up. And we've talked about that many times on my channel, how electricity can pull mud up, how it can pull sand up, and it can pull dust up. It yoinks it right up into the air. if it's strong enough. All right, continuing on. Now that the hole opened up into this world, which was then all water, on which floated the waterfowl of many kinds, there was no land at that time. And it came to pass, as these waterfowl saw this young woman falling, they shouted, "Let's go get her." So at least some of them joined their bodies together, and the young woman fell on a platform of bodies. Then these were wearied, and they asked, "Who will volunteer to care for this woman?" The great turtle took her. And when they got tired of holding her, he in turn asked who could take his place. At last, the question arose as to what they should do to provide her with a permanent resting place in this world. So at first, all these animals sort of flocked together and they caught her as one body of animals, right? She landed on a bunch of bodies of animals. And then a great turtle, right? When you hear the turtle symbolism, it doesn't always, this is my perspective. I don't believe that it has to, it's easier for me to understand the deeper things that are being spoken of if I don't imagine an actual turtle. You know what I mean? But if I think energetically and there's that dome bubble kind of a shape, right? I think that might help some people out. All right. So the turtle grabbed her and then finally he couldn't hold her. And he's like, "I need somebody else to help me out." Finally, it was decided to prepare the earth on which she would live in the future. To do this, it was determined that soil from the bottom of the primal sea should be brought up and placed on the broad, firm carapace of the turtle, where it would increase in size to such an extent that it would accommodate all the creatures that should be produced thereafter. After much discussion, the toad was finally persuaded to dive to the bottom of the waters in search of soil. Bravely making the attempt, he decided to bring up soil from the depths of the sea. This was carefully spread over the turtle, and at once both began to grow in size and in depth. Right, this is sort of a creation story in itself. After the young woman recovered from the illness which she suffered when she was cast down from the upper world, she built herself a shelter in which she lived quite contently. In the course of times, she brought forth a baby girl who grew rapidly in size and in intelligence. That's another thing that I want to talk about too. When we go through these various shifts, it affects us. It affects our bodies. It affects every aspect of life. Everything changes. Some things change slightly. Some things change dramatically. One of the things that seem to change is birth and how long pregnancy lasts for, right? In the world we live in today, very slow growing in the womb for a very long time. Lots of uncomfortable pains and stuff like that are accompanied, especially the pain of actually giving birth. But a long time ago, before the last apocalyptic cycle, it seems to me that there are legends upon legends that indicate, even in the Bible itself, that there was no pain during childbirth. That, as a matter of fact, that pain was diminished worldwide in many people. That there was healing effects. That there was regenerative properties that increased in humanity worldwide. And possibly even that people had better skin back then that allowed to stretch and then to snap back into position, which would make childbearing all that much easier too, right? Also, another thing that I've noticed, it says here that the baby girl grew rapidly in size and in intelligence. There are legends and myths about births happening in the old world that were very rapid, that babies grew within the womb, like in, sometimes a week or sometimes a month or something like that, but babies popped out rather quickly. They grew up, they came out of the womb speaking, walking, talking, right? But in today's world, it's like they're underdeveloped or something. It's like we are underdeveloped. We come out all noodly and barely can take care of ourselves. Like we would all die if somebody didn't take care of us. Even animals can walk and stuff when they're born, many of them. All right, let's continue on. When the daughter had grown to young womanhood, the mother and her were accustomed to going out to dig wild potatoes. Her mother said to her that in doing this, she must face the west at all times. Before long, the young daughter gave signs that she was about to become a mother. Her mother reproved her, saying that she had just violated the injunction and not to face east, as her condition showed that she had faced the wrong way while digging potatoes. So this is the virgin getting pregnant idea, right? it may be possible that there was so much energy during a specific time that our world was so energetically filled that it would be possible for virgins to actually, their eggs inside of their bodies, if they become charged enough, maybe the process begins without the sperm, without needing the sperm at all. That's a possibility. I don't know. But I've heard this story a time or two in the past. It is said that the breath of the west wind had entered her person, causing conception. Now, we've talked about the west wind before. It's known as the zephyr. The west wind does not come from a western direction in the modern way of seeing the directions. The west wind comes up from inside of the earth. It is the breath of the earth itself that gives life to things, which is why if she's impregnated by the west wind, she's going to get pregnant and give birth. When the days of her delivery were at hand, she overheard twins within her body. That's another thing that tends to happen. I've seen a lot of when I'm studying comparative mythology and comparing all these different myths and religions and stuff like that, you'll see twins come up time and time again in the old world, that twins developed in the womb. And that seems to be more of a natural thing, is to have twins in the old world, right? Also, there's a symbolic element there of the anode and the cathode, the good twin and the bad twin, right? That there's balance there, that people would bring balance to the world by giving birth to twins, basically. She overheard twins within her body. She could hear the twins in her body. That's interesting too. In a hot debate as to which one would be born first, which is also classic and found in the Bible. Jacob and Esau, the story of Jacob and Esau. And the proper place of exit. One of the twins declaring that he was going to emerge through the armpit of his mother, which is interesting because in Norse mythology, they talk about how creation was made out of the armpit of Ymir, or the world giant, which is interesting too. And it's an interesting place to come out of is the armpit. The other one declaring that he was going to emerge in the natural way. Hey, Phil, what's up, man? Good to see you. Welcome to my channel, Phil. The first one who was born was of a reddish color. That's interesting. And he was called Flint. The other one was light in color, and he was called the Little Sprout. The grandmother of the twins noticed that one hated the other, so they cast Flint into a hollow tree some distance from the lodge. So one of these twins, or one of these tribes, stays. It stays in the area of the world tree. It stays in the area of the hollowed out trunk of that tree, or the plasma volcano, basically, right? The island at the North Pole. They decide to stay there. They don't want to spread out or anything like that. The other one, they go and they spread out and they fill the world. All right, let's see. Finally, for several days, he returned home with his bow and arrows. At last, he was asked why he had to have a new bow and arrows every time he goes out. This is the brother that left. He replied that there was a young boy in a hollow tree in the neighborhood who used them. The grandmother inquired where the tree stood, and he told her, he told her where the tree was, whereupon then they went there and they brought the other boy home again. So they united these two tribes. When the boys had grown to a man's estate, they decided that it was necessary for them to increase the size of their island, so they agreed to start out together, afterwards separating to create forests and lakes and other things. They parted, as agreed, with Flint going westward and the other brother, Little Sprout, going eastward. In the course of time, on returning, they met in their shelter or lodge at night, agreeing to go out the next day to see what the other had made. Now, this is the anode and cathode story. One brother, or sometimes it's a sister, you know what I mean? One always makes things that are beautiful, that are helpful to humanity, etc. And the other one is always seen as basically being the bad guy, right? It's basically seen as being evil, creating things that are poisonous, creating things that bite, creating things that stab and hurt and pain and stuff like that, right? Because there's balance in the world. Let's see. It says here, on visiting the east the next day, they found that one of the brothers had made a large number of animals which were so fat that they could hardly move, that he had made the sugar maple trees to drop syrup, and that he had made the sycamore tree to bear fine fruit, and the rivers were so formed that half of the water flowed upstream and the other half flowed downstream. Then the reddish-colored brother Flint was super pissed off. I'm gonna say this in my own words. He was really mad at his brother. And he was not happy about what his brother had made, saying that the people who were about to come would live too easily and they would be too happy. So he shook violently the various animals, the bears, the deer, and the turkeys, causing them to become small at once. Now, when it talks about one brother had made the animals real plump and big and fat or whatever, it's also talking about the introduction of gigantism into our world. Right? So one brother caused gigantism and everything became huge and gigantic and the land flowed with milk and honeys. I'm paraphrasing in my own words, right? But the other brother was like, no, that's too good, man. That's too perfect. Nobody's going to learn. Nobody's going to grow. They need something to come against to help them to grow. So he goes and he messes it all up, right? To try to create balance in the world. So all the animals began to shrink, causing them to become small at once, a characteristic that attached itself to their descendants, which means that all of their descendants would get smaller and smaller, which also happened to us, by the way. We're all little tiny people. Like in comparison to the giants we used to be, we keep shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, getting smaller and smaller. But the day will come when the pressure will be released in this world. New gases and new elements will be introduced, or renewed gases and elements will be introduced into this world, and we will start growing once more, or our children at the very least, and their children will also start growing, becoming giants once again. Lastly, he caused the water of the rivers to flow in only one direction, because the original plan would make it too easy for human beings who were about to come to navigate those streams. That's an interesting thing too, that the streams went both directions. They had a current that went one way and a current that went the other way, which seems natural actually when you think about it. But he changed it. Something happened and one of these, the bad brother, changed it so that the currents only went in one direction. At the inspection of each other's work, it resulted in a deadly disagreement between the brothers, who finally came to grips and blows, and Flint was killed in the fierce struggle. Also, relating back to the biblical story of Cain and Abel, right? All right. Is there more? Hold on, let me see. Oh, here's another one. This one is from the Jicarilla Genesis, the Jicarilla Apache. Jicarilla? I'm not sure how to say that. I think it's Jicarilla. Jicarilla. All right, so this one is the Genesis story of the Jicarilla Apache nation or tribe. And they say, in the beginning, the earth was covered with water. Boom. Once again, covered with water. All living things were below in the underworld. Then people could talk. The animals could talk. The trees could talk. And the rocks could talk. It was dark in the underworld, and they used eagle plumes for torches. That's interesting too, right? Oftentimes I see that a feather is a symbolic element that represents plasma or electricity, right? Because it sort of branches out in the middle. So they used eagle plumes for torches in the dark underworld. The people and the animals that go about by day wanted more light, but the night animals, the bear, the panther, and the owl, they wanted darkness. The dispute was long, and at last they agreed to play a game to decide the matter. And it was agreed that if the day animals won the game, there should be light. If the night animals won, it would always be dark. The game began. But the magpie and the quail, which love the light and have sharp eyes, watched until they could see the button through the thin wood of the hollow stick, and they told the people under which one it was. They played once, and the people of the day won. The morning star came out, and the black bear ran and hid in the darkness. They played again, and the day people won. It grew bright in the east, and the brown bear ran and hid himself in a dark place. They played a third time, and the people of the day won again. It grew brighter in the east, and the mountain lion slunk away into the darkness. And they played a fourth time, and again the people of the day won. The sun came up in the east, and it was day. And the owl flew away and hid himself. Still, the people were below the surface, and did not see many things. But the sun stayed higher up and saw more. The sun looked through a hole and saw that there was another world, this earth above. He told the people about the earth above, and they wanted to go there. So they built 4 mounds by which to reach the upper world. It's really interesting too. These four corners or whatnot, the four corners area, that is a microcosm. Here in the United States, we have 4 different states that are connected to one another, and they call that the four corners area, which is where a lot of different tribal people live in the United States, at least, right? Which is a small version of the 4 lands up at the North Pole, right? Let's see. They built a mound in the east, and they planted it with all kinds of fruits and berries that were black in color. In the south, they built another mound and planted all kinds of fruits that were blue. In the west, they built another mound and they planted upon it fruits that were yellow. And in the north, they built another mound, and on it they planted all fruits of various colors. And this is what you're going to see with those different 4 locations too, is those exact same colors. Right? Especially that one color that's always a rainbow, right? There's like a rainbow color. There is a black, there's a blue, and there's a yellow. The mountains had stopped growing, while their tops were yet a long way from the upper world. And the people debated how they could get up to the earth, talking about the earth above them, right? They looked up into their sky, and they knew there was earth at the top, right? They laid feathers crosswise for a ladder, but the feathers were too weak and they broke. They made a second ladder of larger feathers, but again, they were too weak. So they made a third ladder of eagle feathers, but even those were not strong enough to bear the weight. And then the buffalo came, and he said, "Here, take my horns. They are strong. Use them for the ladder." 3 others came and offered their right horns also. The buffalo horns were strong, and by their help, the people were able to climb up through the hole in their sky to the surface of the earth where we are today. But their weight bent the buffalo horns, which before were straight, so that they have been curved ever since. When the people had come up from under the earth, they fastened the sun and the moon with spider threads, so that they could not get away. And they sent them up into the sky to give light, but water covered the whole earth. So 4 storms went to roll the waters away. The black storm blew to the east. Now, think about the correlation between the directions and the colors once again. The black storm blew to the east and rolled up the waters into the eastern ocean. The blue storm blew to the south and rolled up the waters in that direction. The yellow storm rolled up the waters in the west. And the multicolored storm, went to the north and rolled up the waters there. Having rolled up the waters, the storms returned to where the people were awaiting at the mouth of the hole. The waters were rolled up. They were taken up into the sky, just like in the Exodus, when the waters were separated and parted, and they show it as the waters raising up into the sky, which will happen once again. These waters are not going to be here for too long. Now, first, the polecat. Interesting. What a name for a creature, right? Polecat. I have found, if you do an etymological study on strange names of animals just to figure out what the name itself actually means, sometimes they're descriptors of the animal, but sometimes, and oftentimes, I've found that they're descriptors of the places where these animals came from. The polecat. First went out the polecat, but the ground was still soft, and his legs sank back into the black mud and remained black ever since. They sent the tornado to bring him back, for the time was not yet. The badger went out, but he too sank into the mud, and his legs were blackened, so they sent the tornado to call him back. The beaver went out, wading through the mud and swimming through the water. He began at once to build a dam to save the water still remaining in pools, and he didn't come back. The tornado was sent after him, found him hard at work, and asked him why he didn't come back. And he says, "Because I wanted to save water for the people to drink," said the beaver. "Good," said the tornado, and they went back together. They waited again, and they sent out the crow to see if it was time yet. The crow found the earth dry, and many dead frogs, fish, and reptiles lying on the ground, which is what's going to happen when the world floods and the waters come out and stuff. It gets very muddy. Also, when you have worldwide earthquakes sloshing everything around, it creates an effect known as liquefaction, where the water comes up from the ground, rising to the surface, causing the surface to become like quicksand, like a swampy, muddy environment, right? And this gives rise to the quote-unquote mud floods that many people have been studying, where they notice that it looks like, some things have sunk down into the muddy earth. He began picking, So there's all these leftover frogs and stuff like that, and the crow began picking at their eyes. He didn't return until the tornado was sent after him. The people were angry when they found that he had been eating dead bodies, and they changed his color to black. Before, he was gray. That's interesting too. I've heard many stories about how the crow wasn't always black, that it was actually a lighter color. Something happened and it changed its color to black. There's another story talking about who would go and steal fire from the sky people or from the gods above and bring it back down so that the people could have light and that they could be warm again or whatever. And the crow tried. I'm not reading this. I'm just going off memory. But the crow was sent up there to go try to steal some fire. Ultimately, it was Spider-Woman that was able to do it because she was insignificant. Nobody paid attention to her. The crow went up there and he flew above the fire, which allowed all the soot and ash and stuff to cover his body, turning him black. Now we continue on. The earth was now all dry, except for the 4 oceans around it and the lake in the center, where the beaver had dammed up the waters. The ocean around the earth, right? The world ocean, which if you think about it today, right? I'm not thinking about the entirety of the earth, but the original 4-island continent at the North Pole that is surrounded by a world ocean, which is today we call the Arctic Ocean, right? And then in the middle of that, okay, so you have that current that goes around the 4 lands at the North Pole. And then in the middle of those 4 lands, you have a legendary lake, a crystal clear lake of fresh water. And that's what I believe it's referring to. Where the beaver had dammed up all of the waters, all the people came up. They went east until they came to the ocean. Then they turned south until they came again to the ocean. Then they turned west until they came again to an ocean. And then they turned north. As they went, each tribe stopped where it would. But the Jicarillas continued to circle around the place where they had come up from the underworld. 3 times they went around when the ruler became displeased and asked them where they wished to stop. They said, "In the middle of the earth." So he led them to a place very near to Taos and left them there. And the Taos Indians lived near them. So that is that. I mean, quite often they'll straight up tell you the middle of the earth, the central part of the earth. Now, it's hard to figure out where the middle of the earth is as far as being on the surface when you have more of a modern academic view of the earth. But if you can switch gears and put yourself into an ancient cosmological view of our world, then you can see it's quite plain that the middle of the earth is the North Pole. It's right there in the middle. When the Jicarillas were moving about, by accident left a girl behind them near the place where they had come up from the underworld. The girl's name was Yalkai Itsun, the white bead woman. The sun shone upon her as she sat, and she bore a boy child. The moon beamed upon her as she slept, and she bore another child. The firstborn was stronger than the second, and the sun is stronger than the moon. When the boys were large enough to walk, the sun told her where to find her people, and she went to them. The boys lived with their mother near Taos. Let's see. I'm going to see if I want to read the rest of this. Hold on. Oh, okay. So I'm going to paraphrase some of it because it's kind of boring for a second. So one of these boys grows up and he is prophesied to be somebody who would destroy monsters, that would kill dangerous things. And that was his name, the destroyer of dangerous things. And they said that they called him that because he will be sent to destroy many dangerous things which annoy the people. I call these phantazoids. They're demonic looking, crazy, monstrous creatures. Doesn't mean they're all evil or anything. It just means that there are otherworldly monsters and creatures that live below us and that can drop down from the sky above us too. All right. Now, his father told him to go first against a great frog which lived under the water in a lake by Taos and sucked everybody in who came near. His breath was like the sleet lightning at night. And he had sucked so many people under the water that there were very few Taos Indians remaining. So somewhere around this Camp Crystal Lake area, right in the middle of the world, there was said to be this legendary frog creature that sucked people down under the water. What does this sound like? A whirlpool, right? That legendary land at the North Pole is said to have an indrawn sea, aka a whirlpool that sucks things into it, right? At least at certain times of our history. His father gave him a wheel of black stone, a wooden wheel of blue, another wheel of yellow stone, and a various colored wheel of wood. There's those same colors. He gave him likewise 4 fire sticks, black, blue, yellow, and multicolored. When the boy returned to Taos, he went down to the lake and stood upon the east shore early in the morning as the sun was coming up. Excuse me. The frog put his head up from the lake and tried to suck him in, but the boy could not be moved, and the frog dove down under the water again. Then the boy threw the wheel of black stone into the center of the lake. Now, if you look at a map of the North Pole land that was once there, in the center of that lake, in the middle of the world, is a black stone. He stood on the... let me catch up here. The boy threw the black stone into the center of the lake, and the water went down a little bit. He went around to the south shore, and he threw a blue wheel, and the water fell a little bit more. Now, the south shore would be outside of that mountain range, that circular mountain range, right? And it's blue because it represents the ocean going around that land. He stood on the west shore, and he threw in the yellow wheel, and the water grew shallow and muddy. And then he went around to the north, and he threw the multicolored wheel of wood, and at once the water was dried up, and he saw the frog's house in the center of the lake, like a pueblo house with 4 doors, one on each side, and a row of stepping stones from each door to the edge of the lake. Now, whatever is at the center of this world, typically the holy mountain, whatever, however you want to see that as, right? It's said, and it comes up time and time again, and I'm still kind of working on, various theories as to what exactly it may be, but it's said that there are these 4 living creatures, that there are these 4 types of witnesses, or these 4 creatures, or these 4 lights, or these 4 mountains, or these 4 fires, or whatever they are, that are on each side of the throne of God, aka the plasma volcano, Mount Meru, etc. All right. Picking up where we left off, he threw all these various colored circles into this lake. The water went down, revealing the frog's house that had these 4 entrances on each side, or 1 entrance on each of the 4 sides. It says he went around to the east side of the lake, where he had stood at sunrise, and crossed over onto the stepping stones to the first door. On each side of the door stood a guard, a Pueblo Indian who had been sucked in by the frog, and they had been put there to warn the frog should an enemy approach, but the boy only spoke to them, and they were unable to move. At the south door, he found 2 bears that were on guard. At the west door, he found 2 immense snakes, which were hissing and standing up straight. At the north door, he found 2 panthers. So there's always these 2 things at each one of these 4 locations or whatever that sort of are related to one another. They're being cartoonified as animals, but I'm not sure that they were. I believe that they may have been energetic in nature. To each in turn he spoke. They were motionless, and they allowed him to pass. Then he went inside of the house, and there he found the great frog sitting in a room from which a door opened on each of the 4 sides. He asked the frog where all the people were who had been sucked into the lake. But the frog said he didn't know anything about it. So the boy knew this wasn't true. He took out his 4 fire sticks and twirled them rapidly until the room was full of thick smoke, and it choked the frog, and it fell down dead. And he told the 2 Pueblo guards to release their people. And they opened the 4 doors around the sides of the room, and all of the rooms were filled with Pueblos who had been sucked under the water by the frog. There was also a great many little frogs, the children of the great frog, but they were all too small to be dangerous. I would also like to note, it reminds me of something I read in the Bible. In the book of Revelation, it talks about these demonic creatures or entities that come up out of the earth that have the appearance of frogs, that they're described as being frog-like. The boy returned. Sorry, one moment. Let's see. He told the little baby frogs he would let them go, but they should never grow larger. They're not allowed to get any bigger. From them came the present small frogs. The boy turned to Taos with all of the people he had set free from under the water. The Pueblos were very grateful to have their friends restored to them, and invited them to bring his mother and his brother to Taos for anything that they needed. He brought them there for a visit for a while, and then he went back to his father, the son, to see what he would do for him next. I'm just kind of skimming over this real quick. I didn't really want to read this much. I thought I had this highlighted. Yeah. Let's see. Talks about how he destroyed some monsters, etc. Okay, cool. Well, that's enough of that. You get the point of it, right? So now we're going to move on to the Cherokee. Let me double check the chat. Make sure we're still good. Hey, what's up? Dr. Respect, I see you. Matthew Nixon. Bonnie Gertorex, good to see you. Coincidence theorist. Free Soul Hippie, good to see everybody. All right, the Cherokee creation story. This is interesting. Check this out. Hold on, let me switch this up here. Now we're going to talk about the emergence creation story of the Cherokee. Okay, so the creation story of the Cherokee. The earth is a great island floating in a sea of water and suspended at each of the 4 cardinal points by a cord hanging down from the sky. Hanging down from the sky vault. I love it how they describe the sky. They don't just say sky. They describe it as crystal. They describe it as ice. They describe it as rock. They describe it as being solid. Boom. Let me start that over. The earth is a great island floating in a sea of water and suspended at each of the 4 cardinal points by a cord hanging down from the sky vault, which is of solid rock. Boom. The vault of the sky, which is made, according to them, out of solid rock. I think it's probably ice. That's my theory. But regardless, we both agree that there is some sort of a solid barrier up there. When the world grows old and worn out, the people will die and the cords will break, and let the earth sink down into the ocean, and all will be water once again. And the Indians are afraid of this. That's really interesting. So there's these cords. They say that there's these cords holding up the 4 cardinal directions. So in your imagination, you might imagine some sort of a disc that's being held up on the outside by these 4 strings. But I think it's actually those 4 beams or those 4 pillars are in the middle. And that's where the 4 corners area is right there in the middle, where the 4 corners touch. And he says the Indians are very, very afraid of this. That the world flooding. Okay, hey, the good news is we're past that. You live in the time where that's already happened. You know, time after time. I mean, even Jesus said, like, you better hope that the apocalypse doesn't happen in the wintertime, which is when I believe during the winter solstice is whenever I think that the world had been flooded. The summer solstice is the next one to come. But yeah, they all pretty much say that the world flooding is a terrible apocalypse to go through, and it lasts forever. So that's the good news, is we're not in that one. We've already survived and made it past that. Now check this out. When all was water, the animals were above in Galun Lati, beyond the arch. But it was very much crowded up there, and they were wanting more room, so they wandered about, and they wondered what was below the water. At last, Dayuni Si, the beaver's grandchild, the little water beetle, offered to go and see if what he could learn. It darted in every direction over the surface of the water, but could find no firm place to rest. It dived to the bottom, came up with some soft mud, which began to grow and spread on every side until it became the island which we call the earth. It was afterward fastened to the sky with 4 cords, but no one remembers who did this. 4 beams, 4 cords, 4 sky pillars of energy that shoot up and give the impression that the earth itself is being held up by these strings, by these heavenly luminescent strings, pillars, lights, columns, beams, rods, call it what you like to. And that's when you see those beams, that means that's the time when there's no ocean. That means that's the time that you live in a tropical/desert world. When those beams are cut and those beams retract and they go back inside of the earth, that's whenever you go through an apocalypse of water, when the flood and the deluge return. No one remembers who did this. At first, the earth was flat and very soft and wet. The animals were anxious to get down and send out different birds to see if it was dry, but they had found no place to land, and they came back again. Now I want to actually point something out there. These animals that they're talking about are up in the sky, And time again, I've come across many different references to the animals. Their origin, many of them, is actually coming down from the sky, that they floated down to the surface of the earth from above, right? Just like aliens, just like the Anunnaki, just like all these different beings, that they actually had animals that floated down safely and landed safely on the earth. Like I said, the conditions may have been different to allow for that. Now, the great buzzard, the father of all of the buzzards that we see now, he flew over all of the earth. Now, this great buzzard is going to be like the thunderbird or the phoenix, etc. It's the plasma that is shooting up out of Mount Meru, spreading its wings, and it's seen as, you know, some sort of bluebird of happiness or whatnot. The great buzzard. He flew over all of the earth, low down near to the ground, and it was all still very soft. When he reached the Cherokee country, he was very tired, and his wings began to flap and strike the ground, and wherever they struck, this electromagnetic phenomenon bird, right? Wherever the wings of this electromagnetic bird, I'm going to call it, hit the earth, there was a valley. And where they turned up again, there was a mountain. When the animals above saw this, they were afraid that the whole world would be mountains. So they called that bird back, but the Cherokee country remains full of mountains to this day. So they're talking about the literal, actual, physical creation of the earth being pulled up into the sky through electromagnetism. Excuse me. When the earth was dry and the animals came down, it was still dark. So they got the sun to set on track and move it every day on the island. Grew boss grew. Just subscribed. Welcome. It was too hot, and the red crawfish had his shell scorched a bright red, so the people decided not to eat it. The conjurers put the sun another handbreadth up higher in the air. So let me rewind just real quick and explain what's going on here. When this happened, the sun was way lower. As a matter of fact, everything up in the sky was way lower. The sky itself was seen as if it had fallen from space, like that it somehow got way too close to the ground, and people were panicking. Animals were panicking. Everybody's panicking. So they tried to figure out ways to like get the sky to go back up to its proper position. Right? So this is the story that they tell. So they put it up different handbreadths, right? So if you hold your hand up like this and you put it out to the horizon, that's 1. Then you can put it up one more handbreadth, that's 2. Another one, 3, right? It continues on all the way up to 7. The conjurers put the sun another handbreadth higher, but it was still too hot. So they raised it again, and they raised it again, until it was 7 handbreadths high. So 7 times up there, and just under the sky arch. Then it was right, and they left it there. And the conjurers call the highest place the 7th height, or the 7 heavens, right? Because it is 7 handbreadths above the earth. Every day the sun goes along under its arch and returns at night to the upper side to the starting place. That handbreadth thing's really interesting. Oh, that's right. So this reminds me of another legend that I had read about how the sky had fallen and it had come too close to the earth. And it's very similar to this story that I'm reading, but now I'm just going off of memory. And it said that the solution that the people came up with was that all around the world, they would all grab poles. They would have beams, and that they would prop those beams up against the sky, and all at once they would heave, and they would lift the sky up higher using these beams, and they would heave again until it got up higher and higher and higher, which is just an optical illusion. Basically, it's an optical effect of changes in our atmosphere that are happening that allow us to see things magnified or that much closer, or them getting further and further away to their proper places. All right, it goes on to say, there is another world under this, and it is like ours in everything, animals, plants, and people, save for the seasons, they're different. Hold on one second. The streams that come down from the mountains are the trails by which we reach this underworld, and the springs at their heads are doorways by which we enter it. But to do this, one must fast and go to water and have one of the underground people for a guide. We know that the seasons in the underworld are different from ours because the water in the springs is always warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer than the outer air is. So the world underneath us, right? There's a world above us. There's a world below us. There's probably worlds off to the sides of us. But at the very least, in many native legends, they talk about the various worlds. One of them underneath us, right? That world is opposite of our world. Okay? So the world underneath us is the exact, it's the exact same. It's another Earth, basically. It's another Earth number or whatever. But their seasons are the exact opposite. Right? Every time we go through this apocalyptic cycle, the seasons flip, they change, they switch around, right? Right now, our sun is going from east to west. Their sun down there is going from west to east. It's totally opposite. They have totally opposite seasons and everything. All right, continuing on. Oh, I'm gonna paraphrase this next part just for the sake of time. So basically, all of the animals and the plants, they were told that they had to stay up for 7 days. Right? While some stuff was happening, basically it's the apocalypse. And they were said, hey, you need to stay up for 7 days. Don't fall asleep. They were told this. They were warned and cautioned, don't fall asleep during this event. Those animals that did fall asleep, they took their chances or whatever, but the ones that stayed up as they were commanded to not fall asleep during this 7-day period, they were blessed with certain gifts. Like they had the ability to see at nighttime and stuff like that, right? Or the trees, for example, the trees that didn't fall asleep during this 7-day apocalyptic event, they became deciduous. They were trees that would not shed their leaves and go through various changes whenever it got cold. Men came after the animals and plants. At first, there was only a brother and a sister until he struck her with a fish and told her to multiply. So it was. In 7 days, a child was born to her. And thereafter, every 7 days, another. And they increased very fast until there was a danger that the world would not keep them. And then it was made that a woman should only have one child per year. And it was so ever since. It's another reference to that rapid aging, or that rapid growth, I should say. Aging is a bit different. Aging is more like falling apart and becoming decrepit, right? You can, in the old world, you could age, you could get older, but your body wouldn't reciprocate that it was growing old and becoming decrepit. You know what I mean? You were just older, not broken down. All right, that was the Cherokee creation myth. Now let's move on to Cheyenne. And this is actually from a sweet book. I want to actually give the name of this book, American Indian Myths and Legends. This is a good book. I'm probably going to reference this book many times in the future. Now, this is from the Cheyenne. The Cheyenne tribe, and it says, in the beginning, the great medicine created the earth, and the waters upon the earth, the sun, the moon, and the stars. And then he made a beautiful country to spring up in the far north. There were no winters, with ice and snow and bitter cold. There was none of that. It was always spring. Wild fruits and berries grew everywhere, and great trees shaded the streams of clear water that flowed through the land. In this beautiful country, the great medicine put animals, birds, insects, and fish of all kinds. Then he created human beings to live with other creatures. Every animal, big and small, every bird, big and small, every fish and every insect could talk to the people and could understand them. Let me pause on that. Let me just pause on that real quick. That's telepathy, right? That's the original language. There's debate in various religious circles about which country has the original language and which country owns the rights to say that our language was the first language, etc., right? Some people think it's this language. Some people think it's that language. I think they're all wrong. And I believe that the first language or a form of communication was actually just telepathy, that the energy was increased and amplified so much in our world that we could feel. And you could feel what other people sensed, basically, if you decided to share that with them. So the people could talk, the animals could talk, the fish could talk, the plants could talk, everything could talk, basically. Or maybe not talk like how I'm talking right now by opening my mouth and, my guttural utterances, right? They could communicate, right? They could let others know what was happening with them. The people could understand each other, for they had a common language and lived in friendship. They went naked, and they fed on honey and wild fruits. They were never hungry. Never hungry. I love that, right? Never hungry. There was a time when there was no hunger, right? Not. It doesn't say they were never hungry because they had all this food around them that they could eat all the time and just gorge themselves in paradise. No, they were never hungry, right? From time to time, they might need, a few nuts or some berries or something to eat, but there was no hunger in the world. A hunger has developed since that time, right? And we become consumers. The good news is I believe that we're returning to that time, and hunger will be taken away, as well as the need to sleep and some other things too. Let's see. They wandered everywhere among the wild animals, and when night came, they were weary, they lay down on the cool grass, and they slept. During the days, they talked with the other animals, for they were all friends. The Great Spirit, I like that. The Great Spirit created 3 kinds of human beings. First, this is why we have talking animals in Disney and all that stuff, right? That's like something about that resonates with humans, with people. Not like, oh, wouldn't that be awesome if animals talked? Like, I mean, yeah, it would be, but it's more real for me to say it will be. Won't that be awesome when the animals talk again? Like that's, you know what I mean? That's how I would probably say it. Let's see. The Great Spirit created 3 kinds of human beings. First, those who had hair all over their bodies. Second, white men who had hair all over their heads and their faces and on their legs. Third, red men who had very long hair on their heads only. The hairy people were strong and active. The white people with the long beards were in a class with the wolf. For both were the trickiest and most cunning creatures in all of the beautiful world. The red people were good runners, agile, swift, whom the great medicine taught to catch fish and eat fish at a time when none of the other people knew about eating meat, which is very interesting. The world was vegetarian, or most of it was, it seemed. After a while, the hairy people left the north country, and they went south, where all the land was barren. Then the red people prepared to follow the hairy people into the south. Before they left the beautiful land, however, the great medicine called them together. On this occasion, the first time the red people had assembled in one place, the great medicine blessed them and gave them some medicine spirit to awaken their dormant minds. From that time on, they seemed to possess intelligence and to know what to do. The great medicine singled out one of the men and told him to teach his people to band together so that they could all work and clothe their naked bodies in skins of panther and bear and deer. The great medicine gave them power to hew and shape and flint and other stones into any shape that they wanted, into arrow and spearheads, cups, pots, axes, etc. The red people stayed together forever afterwards. They left the beautiful country and went southward. Or if you're in the North Pole, that would just be outwards, right? Away from the North Pole. They went southward in the same direction as the hairy people had taken. The hairy people remained naked, but the red people put on clothes because the great medicine had told them to do this. Which makes sense because the atmosphere was going to start shifting and changing, and seasons were going to be introduced. At first, there are no seasons. At first, there's just one great spring, summer type of a season, very tropical and lush and nice. There's no need for clothing and stuff like that. But after the conditions start changing and pressure starts building back up in our world, it's going to start creating weather patterns and stuff, right? And then the sun or the focal point is going to move in the sky, and the seasons will return, basically. So it's not that this creator being was like endorsing violence or killing things or whatever. It's more like, because I mean, that's reality of everything everywhere. We all live off of one another, right? So anyways, my point is he told them you need to put some clothes on because the seasons are about to come, basically. When the red men arrived in the south, they found that the hairy people had scattered and made homes inside of hills and in caves high up on the mountains. They seldom saw the hairy men, for the hairy ones were afraid and went inside of their caves when the red men came. The hairy people had pottery and flint tools like those of the red men, and in their caves they slept on beds made out of leaves and skins. For some reason, they decreased in numbers until they finally disappeared entirely. And today, the red men cannot tell what became of them. What do you guys think in the chat and in the comments? What do you think the red men, not the red men, what do you think that the hairy men are? I just want to see everyone's ideas. After the red men had lived in the south for some time, the great medicine told them to return north, for the barren southland was going to be flooded. Okay, so imagine this. This is during the time of the red sky, right? If we're talking about red and blue shifts, the time of the red sky, there's no ocean. There is no flood. The time of the blue sky is when there's flood and there's ocean, right? So in my mind, I'm seeing these people living during magical times, mythic and legendary times, when the sky was more of a red hue, which means that those blue beams would have been shooting up and those strings were still seen as holding up the edges of the earth, right? And they're being warned, you need to come back to the place of emergence for safety, for safekeeping, because there's going to be a flood. And this is the only place that will survive. Let's see. So the great medicine told them to return north, for the barren southland was going to be... The barren southland was going to be flooded. Let me make sure I can still hear myself. There we go. So there was a flood coming. And they were warned, right? When they went back, and we're going to be warned too. I just want to point that out, okay? I found that life is fair, right? It doesn't seem fair sometimes, but in the grand scheme of things, when we can look further down the horizon, we can see how fair it actually is. If they were warned of the coming flood and the deluge, it stands to reason we will be warned of the coming fires and the great inferno or conflagration. When they went back to that beautiful northern land, they found that the white-skinned, long-bearded men, some of the wild animals were gone. They were no longer able to talk to the animals, but this time they controlled all other creatures, and they taught the panther, the bear, and similar beasts to go and hunt for them. They increased in numbers, and they became tall and strong and active. And then for a second time, the red people left the beautiful land to go south. The waters had gone, the grass and trees had grown, and the country had become as beautiful as the north. While they were living there, however, another flood swept over the land and scattered the red men. When the great waters at last sank and the ground was dry, the red people did not come together again. They traveled in small bands, just as they had done in the beginning before the great medicine told them to unite. The flood destroyed almost everything, and they were on the point of starvation. So they started back to their original home in the north, as they had done before. But when they reached the north country this time, they found the land was all barren. There were no trees, no living animals, not a fish in the water. When the red people looked upon their once beautiful home, the men cried aloud, and the women and the children wept. This happened in the beginning, when the great medicine created us. The people turned to the south and lived as well as they could. In some years better, others were worse. After many hundreds of years, just before the winter season came, the earth shook. The high hills set forth fire and smoke. During that winter, there were great floods. The people had to dress in furs and live in caves, for the winter was long and cold. It destroyed all of the trees, though when the spring came, there was new growth. So this is also referenced in legends of Norse mythology and history of an event known as Fimbulvetr, or the Great Winter. Fimbulvetr. It's a great winter that's basically about 7 years long. The first 3 years are sort of mild in comparison to the last 3 years. The last 3 years are horrible, terrible. It's a time of war on the earth. It's a time where there's so much cold and snow and other things. The weather is so bad that people are just stuck in their houses for a long time. And there's a lot of death and starvation and stuff. And I did a video on that too. It's in my Plasma Apocalypse playlist. The red men suffered much and were almost famished when the great medicine took pity on them. He gave them corn and plant and buffalo for meat. And from that time, there were no more floods and no more famines. The people continued to live in the south, and they grew and they increased. There were many different bands with many different languages, for the red men were never united after the second flood. The descendants of the original Cheyenne had men among them who were magicians with supernatural wisdom. They charmed not only their own people, but the animals that they lived on. No matter how fierce or wild the beast, it became so tame that people could go up to it and handle it. This magic knowledge was handed down from the original Cheyenne who came from the far north. Today, Bushyhead is the only one who understands that ancient ceremony, and the Cheyenne consider him equal in rank to the medicine arrow keeper and his assistants. And that is the emergence story / creation story of the Cheyenne tribe. All right, sweet. That is an awesome book. We're going to do 2 more examples here. One's just a real quick one. So, what was this? The Hopi? Hold on, let me double check. No, the Cherokee. So, I just want to point out, right? Their descriptors of things like the earth, similar on all counts. The sky, similar on all counts. This one says that the island hung from 4 thick ropes from the sky, which was solid rock. They say the sky is solid, right? I mean, think about it. If there's no solid barrier up there, what is all of this, about trying to make it through the hole and something growing through the sky and trying to climb out and standing on top of, you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. In that particular narrative. Another time they said the earth was a great island floating above the seas, suspended by 4 rawhide ropes representing the 4 sacred directions, and it hung down from the crystal sky. There were no people, but the animals lived in a home above the rainbow. So this is another reference to the vault of the sky, the firmament of the sky, or the dome above us, as I traditionally call it. And it says that it's crystal in this one. The other one, they said it's rock. This one, they say it's crystal. My guess is that it is probably ice. Okay, now we're going to do one more here. Maybe. Nope. One sec. Well, that's weird. Oh, here it is. Okay, cool. I had a web page pulled up, but it was like blank for a second. All right, cool. So we're going to end things with this. We talked about the past. We talked about prior worlds. We talked about the underworld and the worlds above, etc., and surviving the prior apocalypses. Now we're going to go back to the Hopi where we started, and we're going to talk about their emergence, their planned emergence, into the 5th world, into the next world. Right? The Hopi, the people of peace. Okay. I'm not referring to DNA. I'm not referring to blood related people or whatever. It may be that they are, but I'm actually referring to people of peace. Excuse me. Okay. Last one. This is going to talk about Hopi prophecies about the future. So we talked about the past. I thought it'd be cool to end things on the future because they're the same thing. Hopi prophecy states that World War III will be started by those people who first revealed the light or the divine wisdom or intelligence in the other old countries. When the war comes, the United States will be destroyed by gourds of ashes, which will fall to the ground, boiling the rivers and burning the earth, where no grass will grow for many years and causing a disease that no medicine can cure. So here's another reference to fire. Oh man, my eye got all super red. It's all itchy for some reason. Here's another reference to fire coming next. Okay. They're not saying, hey, get ready for the world to be flooded or anything like that. It's ridiculous because the world's clearly already flooded, right? These comprise the 9 most important prophecies of the Hopis, connected with the creation of the 9 worlds, the 3 prior worlds on which we lived, the present 4th world, and the 3 future worlds that we have yet to experience, and the world of Taioa, the creator, and his nephew, Sutuknag. The article begins with the Hopi prophecy first published in the mimeographed manuscript that circulated among several Methodist and Presbyterian churches in 1959. The end of all Hopi ceremonialism will come when a Kachina removes his mask during a dance in the plaza before uninitiated children, the general public. For a while, there will be no more ceremonies, no more faith, and then Orabi will be rejuvenated with its faith and ceremonies, marking the start of a new cycle of Hopi life. So I'm going to tell you my interpretation of that prophecy. I have talked about the abomination of desolation. I have talked about the sun changing colors and turning blue. I've talked about the sun becoming so hot and so bright because of that focus of the light above no longer spreading outwards, but becoming more focused, and the daylight itself becoming more focused, and therefore the length of a day becoming shorter and the days getting shorter and shorter, that eventually we look up and we see that the sun starts to turn blue, and it gets so hot and so focused that all we see right before it goes out and there's darkness is a ring of blue, a blue flamed ring of fire, basically, up there in the sky. And that is seen to me as the Kachina removing its mask, right? That it will actually settle above the North Pole, and that the sun, or the sky Kachina, will take off its mask and show its true face, which is black, and it'll have like a blue ring around it. And it dances in the plaza, which is the central place, right? The center place in the world, before uninitiated children. That is you and I, people of today, the modern people who have no idea, who think this is all fiction and fantasy and stuff like that. And it's all going to happen. They're going to witness the most crazy, fantastic things ever. Excuse me. World War III will be started by those people who first revealed the light. The United States will be destroyed, land and people, by atomic bombs and radioactivity. Only the Hopi in their homeland will be preserved to an oasis which refugees will flee. I also want to jump in real quick and give my opinion on these prophecies. These prophecies are seen through the filter of the individual who gave the prophecy and through the filter of the person who received the prophecy. Okay? So sometimes they interpret the prophecy, and that interpretation becomes a part of the prophecy. Just like this one right here that says the United States will be destroyed by atomic bombs and radioactivity. The reason that they're guessing that it's by atomic bombs and radioactivity is because of the descriptions of what has happened to Turtle Island or to the United States or to these other places. And they have seen these things, just like in the book of Revelation, where traditionally John is trying to describe futuristic, otherworldly phenomenon in his modern understanding of the world. It's a very similar thing. Bomb shelters are a fallacy. It is only materialistic people who seek to make shelters. Those who are at peace in their hearts already are in the greatest shelter of life. I agree with that, right? I mean, I have already come to terms with my life, and I have decided and spoken with the sky, God, whatever you want to call it, and I accept. I said, you know what? If it is written for me to die during the apocalypse, I accept. If it is written for me to survive, I accept. Either way, no matter what happens to me personally, I'm going to continue to strive to change my energy so that it is good. Therefore, if I survive the apocalypse, I bring my best self into a new world, and I will reproduce myself and make reproductions that are the best possible versions to bring into this new place, because I want a world that is filled with goodness and peace and purity and kindness and wholesomeness. You know what I mean? So that's my deal, what I'm working on right now. And if I don't make it, totally fine. Maybe there's a reason for that. You know what I mean? And I didn't make the cut, but either way, I think life goes on, and I'm pretty good with where I am. There will be a spiritual conflict with material matters. Material matters will be destroyed by spiritual beings who will remain to create one world and one nation under one power, that of the Creator. The time is not far away. It will come when the blue star Kachina dances in the plaza and takes off his mask. He represents a blue star, far off and yet invisible, which will make its appearance pretty soon. And my bet is that's referring to the sun turning blue. I know a lot of people are real big fans of like blue comets and, little tiny things out there. Could be. There's probably going to be all kinds of different interesting, weird things happening in the skies. I mean, they're already happening, right? We had the green comet just recently and other things that are happening too. So you're going to see, I'm telling you right now, like I firmly feel pretty good that you are going to start seeing in the next, probably, I don't know, months or years. I wouldn't be surprised if it was months or less. Strange anomalies happening left and right all the time, like pretty much every day. Because the energy is amplifying exponentially. Where was I? The emergence of the future fifth world has begun. It is being made by the humble people of little nations, tribes, and racial minorities. You can see this in the earth itself. Plant forms from previous worlds are beginning to spring up as seeds. This could start a new study of botany if people were wise enough to read them. The same kinds of seeds are being planted in the sky as stars. So this is sort of a prediction, and it's also pointing out something that's happening now, that the plants of the world to come look altogether alien and different than the plants of today. That's because they live under two totally different conditions, which cause the plants to grow differently. And as the energy increases just before the end, you're going to see plants starting to grow a little bit differently, as do people and animals too. These comprise the 9 most, I already read that part. The Hopi and others who were saved from the great flood made a sacred covenant with the Great Spirit never to turn away from him. He made a set of sacred stone tablets called the Teponi, which he breathed his teachings onto, his prophecies and his warnings. This is also another thing. These sacred tablets, these tablets of destiny, or these commandments, or whatever you want to call them, these something that was engraved and written on stone, was given to the people to teach them how to live their life. That's also another thing I see in comparative mythology. Before the Great Spirit hid himself again, he placed before the leaders of the 4 different racial groups 4 different colors of and sizes of corn. Each one was to choose which one would be their food in this world. The Hopi waited until last, and they picked the smallest ear of corn. And the Great Spirit said, "It is well done. You have obtained the real corn, for all of the others are imitations in which are hidden seeds of different plants. You have shown me your intelligence. For this reason, I will place in your hands these sacred stone tablets, Teponi, symbol of power and authority over all of the land and life, to guard, protect, and hold in trust for me until I shall return to you in a later day, for I am the first and I am the last." Sound familiar? The great chieftain and the Bow clan, the great chieftain of the Bow clan, led the faithful ones to this new land. But he fell into evil ways. His 2 sons scolded him for his mistake, and after they died, they assumed the responsibilities of leadership. Each brother was given a set of Teponi. That's the tablets. And they were both instructed to carry them to a place which the Great Spirit directed for them. The elder brother of the shining light was told to go immediately to the east toward the rising sun, and upon reaching his destination to start back immediately and to look for his younger brother, who remained on Turtle Island. Now they say the continental United States. I don't feel that the United States is the original Turtle Island. That's just me. I know it's probably not a popular opinion. I feel it has been falsely attributed as being Turtle Island. It looks nothing like a damn turtle at all to me. The North Pole Island is what I feel is a good candidate for being Turtle Island. Now, like I said, we talked about those 4 corners and how the Hopi and other tribes, they were looking for certain signs in the sky, and it very well may be that as they were wandering about, lost, following various signs in the sky, trying to get back home, that they saw something above the area of the Grand Canyon, and that's where they decided to just stay and settle. And they were happy with that, and that seemed to be a good place for them, and it still seems to be a good place to this day. But I don't believe, I'm not convinced fully, that that is the actual place of emergence for everybody, right? I feel like there's a huge emergence place or a huge opening. But it may be, actually, no, I think the Hopi don't even say that they emerged from the Grand Canyon. I think that they say they stopped at the Grand Canyon. So they assume because that's where they stopped, that's must be where they came up out of. You know what I mean? I feel like that's maybe the logic that's being used there. I could be wrong, but anyways, moving forward. The elder brother would restore all land to his younger brother, from whom the evil one among the white men had taken it. The elder brother of the shining light also would come to look for the Teponi tablets and fulfill the mission given to them by the Great Spirit. Now, remember how I told you how they were given these tablets and that the Fire Clan or the Fire Nation held on to one of the corners, and that corner had the head of the stick figure, right? So when you see the stick figure in the sky and then the head is attached to it. This is all celestial phenomenon, right? The beam of inner earth energy. By the way, we're going to do Truth in Movies tomorrow, and my God, you have to watch this one. I'm still working on it, but it's going to be artificial intelligence, AI. It's so good. It took me like 2 hours just to get through the opening credits or the opening scene. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling now. Let's see. Let's finish this up real quick. Let's see. The younger brother was instructed to travel throughout the land and mark his footsteps as he went about. Both brothers were told that a great white star would appear in the sky, and when that happened, all people would know that the elder brother had reached his destination. Thereupon, all people were to settle wherever they happened to be at that time, there to remain until the elder brother returned. The Hopi settled in the area now known as the Four Corners, where the state lines of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado meet. They lived in humble simplicity, and the land produced abundant crops. This area is the heart of Turtle Island, or at least the United States, and of Mother Earth. I feel like it's an energetic strong point, but I don't know if it's the heart, but that's just me. It is the microcosmic image of the macrocosm of the entire planet. And with that, I totally agree. The four corners, the four lands at the North Pole, totally micro and macrocosm on different levels. It's all fractal anyway. Each Hopi clan perpetuates a unique ceremony, and the ceremonies together maintain the balance of the natural forces of sunlight, rain, and winds, and reaffirm the Hopi respect for all life and trust in the Great Spirit. The Hopi are told that after a time, white men would come and take their land and try to lead the Hopi into evil ways. But in spite of all the pressures against them, the Hopi were told that they must hold on to their ancient religion and their land, though always without violence. That's the key thing. Once you become violent, you're no longer Hopi. You just renounce everything. You know what I mean? So it doesn't mean to just let people push you around. It doesn't mean just let people take your land and give you, a portion of it, or, to allow you to gamble on your land or whatever. Like, that's not what that means. Fight for your beliefs or your families or whatever it is that other people are trying to take away. But I feel like when it's talking about violence, it's like hunting. Hunting is violent, but it's not shunned by specific tribal gods or whatnot. As a matter of fact, oftentimes those tribal gods are saying, go hunt, by all means, go eat, etc. Right? Anyways, I'm sort of addressing all of you out there. If you're from one of these tribes or from one of these nations or clans or whatever you refer to it as, we have all fallen a long way. We've all been waiting a very long time. We're all separated. We feel like there's nothing we can do. We feel helpless and hopeless sometimes. But I'll tell you what, you hold on and you can keep on. You keep going and trust in what has been already recorded. Trust in what has already happened over and over and over again. Don't lose hope. Don't lose your strength. Keep on going and continue to hold on to what makes you Hopi, man. Hold on to your peace. Hold on to your identities. That's why I do this kind of stuff. I'm finding my identity. All right. Anyways, let's see. When he returns to his younger brother, the Teponi will be placed side by side to show all the world that they are true brothers. That could be a reference to Anode and Cathode Mountains too. Then great judgment will take place, for the elder brother will help the younger brother to obtain real justice for all of the Indian brothers who have been cruelly mistreated by the white man since he came to Turtle Island. The transformed elder brother, the true white brother, will wear a red cloak or a red cap, similar to the pattern on the back of the horned toad. He will bring no religion but his own. This sounds like Superman to me. I mean, I don't know. And will bring with him the Teponi tablets. He will be all-powerful. None will be able to stand against him. He will come swiftly and in one day gain control of the entire continent. You know what? Maybe it's referring to some celestial event. Maybe the true white brother is something in the sky, and as it moves about, it leaves a red trail behind it. That's a theory that is popping into my head right now. The true white brother will bring with him two great intelligent, and powerful helpers, one of whom will have a sign of a swastika or a masculine symbol of purity, and the sign of the sun. The second great helper will have the sign of a Celtic cross with red lines representing female lifeblood between the arms of the cross. So you've got a male sign, a female sign, an anode and a cathode, right? And that's really interesting. It talks about there being a red cross as a sign in the sky. I came across that exact same description in the annals and the history of, what was that book I just got? The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. It talks about how they recorded in the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages how there was these different factions who were at war. They looked up and they saw this huge red crucifix in the sky. It's really interesting. When the great purification is near, these helpers will shake the earth first for a short time in preparation. So before the actual day comes, there's going to be worldwide earthquakes. Okay. You're seeing little tiny birth pangs right now. Okay. I know people are like, oh my God, there's like a 7 point something off in somewhere. That's tiny. Okay. You have no idea what is actually on the way when the whole earth is shaking. Like, you have no idea. So these are signs and omens like we've talked about. So before that great day of purification, there will be huge earthquakes. From these two brothers. They actually are said as being the ones who shook the earth. Could be the anode and cathode mountains waking up, the two witnesses, right? And in Revelation talks about how the two witnesses have power for a certain amount of time to speak and to warn people and stuff. They will be joined by the true white brother who will become one with them and bring the purification day to the Lord. So maybe the true white brother has something to do with the blue beam. I just call it blue. It doesn't have to be blue, okay? But I feel like it's excited oxygen, so I feel like it might be in the blue spectrum. Also could be white or both, bluish white. And then it says they'll join together, which is also interesting too, because you have the two legs of the Squatterman stick figure creating an electrical arc, and then that main center beam that unites those two, right? All three will help the younger brother, the Hopi and the pure-hearted people, to make a better world. In the prophecies, the two brothers are designated by the Hopi word for population, as if they were large groups of people. I believe that large groups of people will actually come up from those two islands, the anode and the cathode island, probably one full of men and the other one full of women. That's my guess. The true white brother and his helpers will show the people of the earth a great new life plan that will lead to everlasting life. Now, I also want to comment on that word everlasting. My studies, I broke down that word the etymology of everlasting, and it actually means and conveys from age to age. So everlasting means it lasts for an age or for an ever, not forever as in without end, but it lasts for an eon, for an epoch, for an age, right? Everlasting or age lasting, because, entropy will be reintroduced at some point. Let's see. There will be some sort of a World War III that will happen. And this person who wrote the article thinks that it involves China, Palestine, India, and Africa. I also think there's going to be a war. So I'm just going to be very blunt about that. I personally feel, according to my studies and my just feelings about the world right now in its agitated state, before every reset story that I've ever come across, there is always some sort of a rise in violence, always swarming of humans or swarming of animals and bugs. And there is always some sort of a fight and a war. And that seems to me so far to be the time when the world is so distracted with itself that some of us can slip away off to a place of safety. When the war comes, the United States will be destroyed by gourds of ashes, which will fall to the ground, boiling the rivers and burning the earth. No grass will grow for many years, causing a disease that no medicine can cure. This can only mean, well, this is their opinion. I'm going to skip that part. Let's see. There is no shelter for evil. When the blue star Kachina dances in the plaza and removes his mask, the time of the great trial will be here. The Hopi believe that only they will be saved. And I like that. If Hopi means person of peace or someone who has good vibes and full of good energy, I support that. Excellent. Good. Let's see. The author of this seems to continue on and say, this seems to be a prophecy about a pole shift, a flipping of the planet on its axis. The Hopi call this imminent condition, and that of society today as Goyanis Guatsi, which means world out of balance, a state of life that calls for another way. Man, I resonate with all of this stuff. The following extraordinary Hopi prophecy was first published in a mimeographed manuscript that circulated amongst several Methodists. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to read the following Hopi prophecy. That's the one where they talk about how, like, Whitefeather was talking about the Pahana coming back, the signs. So there's the first sign, which was the white skinned men. The second sign, the land crisscrossed with wheels and stuff. All the way up to the fourth sign. I mean, I've read this one probably way too much, so I'm actually not going to read this one. If you want to hear all that, plus I'm losing my voice right now. I do go over this particular prophecy in one of my videos that I talked about, the Kachina and all that stuff. So my voice is getting kind of scratchy, so let me pull up the chat and say hello real quick. How's everybody? How's everyone doing? Man, I hope it wasn't a boring presentation or anything. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you got something of value out of it. I'm sorry that I didn't have a lot of pictures up like I normally do. But I didn't want to this time. This time I wanted to do it just me talking, and you know, you can have a nice picture in the background to check out while I'm giving this presentation. Please, if you have something to add to the conversation, jump in the comments, leave a comment down there so we can all vote on it and like it. And others who are watching my video, they go through the comments as I'm talking, you know, and they can glean a lot more if we all contribute and we all add to that pot, making our Good Vibe Tribe version of Stone Soup together. All right, cool. Well, hey, good vibes to you all. Do stay tuned tomorrow. Hopefully I still have my voice. We're going to break down the movie AI like crazy. I'm finding so many interesting things with this movie. I can't wait to share them with you. Until next time. Oh, and go check out my book on Amazon. I'm sure it's been up here the whole time, so I don't have to really shout out to myself. But I have an awesome website, I have an awesome book, and I have a surprise coming for all of you once my channel gets to 100,000 subscribers. Something I've been working on for months, almost a year, maybe half a year, 6 months at least, I'd say. All right, cool. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.
So hard to fade away. I try so hard to fade away, but something's forcing me to stay. It
You in this vast multiverse.
Your powers too wide.